Hey everyone, welcome to the second week of DC's Infinite Frontier initiative. Last week we reviewed issue 0 of Infinite Frontier, which ended up being the weakest book of the launch so far. This week we have 4 new books kicking off this initiative. We have Superman number 29, Wonder Woman 770, The Joker number 1, and Batman Urban Legends number 1. So I'm gonna crack into these books and let you know what I think. So the first book I read this week was Superman 29. This and Wonder Woman were the 2 books that I was the most curious about reading this week. Superman is one of those titles where, you know, it's either amazing or it just sucks. Like, there's no middle ground. There are a lot of great Superman runs out there, but it's definitely a character where, for whatever reason, people have trouble figuring out how to write Superman. Like, they feel like he is this very obtuse character to write for because he's overpowered or he's too much of a Boy Scout or whatever. And I was curious to see what Philip Kennedy Johnson was going to do with the character. There is a little bit of a cheat in this, which is that it's actually told from Superboy's perspective. So in a sense, this isn't really a Superman book, it's a Superboy book. That said, the way he approaches this story is interesting because basically what you have in here is Superman and Superboy in space closing up wormholes that are opening up all around Earth. You find out that Superman is vulnerable to the radiation coming out of these black holes while Superboy is not. And the central conceit of the story really is about Superboy coming to terms with the fact that Superman isn't infallible. As you grow up as an adult, you look back on your parents and, you know, your parents are your parents. Like, they're the be-all, end-all, and then you grow up and you discover that they're fallible too, right? You sort of learn about your mortality through your parents' mortality. That's what this book kind of deals with, which was well done. It gave a good emotional grounding to the story. One thing I was thinking about when I was reading issue 0 of Infinite Frontier was, if you're gonna age up Superboy, but you're also gonna bring back Kal-El, like, what's the value in having the new Superboy aged up? If you're going to take the perspective that Superboy is growing up and he's learning that his parents aren't infallible and that they aren't impervious to everything, that's a very relatable story you would not be able to tell with Kal-El. And so I think that whether it was Philip Kennedy Johnson's, you know, preferred choice to have an aged up Superboy, I think he's handling it well in this title. When it comes to the art on this book, I will say that Phil Hester, while he does a good job in this, the artwork definitely feels a little bit empty to me. And I'm not quite sure exactly why that is, but I found, for whatever reason, that while Phil Hester and Scott McDaniel and kind of those angular, hard-line artists, so here's like the opening spread, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, that style really worked for me in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I don't know if it's just a change in how creators are approaching inking, or if it's like, you know, computer coloring or what it is, but the artwork seems just a lot more empty now than it did at the time. And maybe they're just like rushing the art a little bit too, and so there's just finer details that Phil Hester maybe would have put in the past that he didn't put in this time. I really don't know. But definitely, between the writing and the art, I would say the art was the weaker part of the book, but not bad either. It was fine. It just didn't really blow me away. Now, this is one of the soon-to-be infamous $4.99 books in the Infinite Frontier launch, which means that you do get a backup in this. I guess it's not Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, because Jimmy Olsen is really just a narrator and a supporting character. He's not the main character, but it does kind of seem to center around him and his interactions following Bibbo Bibowski, who is a character I don't really remember very well beyond he was in like the Return of Superman, Death of Superman era. He was like kind of a supporting character in that. He's having an adventure where he's being stalked by these 2 metahumans that are trying to lure Superman out into the open to have some kind of confrontation with them. Super brief story, hard to really know where it's going right now. I think that probably as the weeks go on, I'm probably going to need to string some of these backup story arcs together to really give you a valid opinion on it, because there just really isn't a lot to say right now. I'm certainly not clamoring to spend an extra $1 on Bibo Babowski, but that said, I didn't hate it either, and I do like the idea of backup stories. I just hope that there are some hidden gems in the backup stories that are going to be coming out. One final thought I want to say about this book is Infinite Frontier is not a hard reboot like New 52. So more or less books are keeping its numbering, but they're also, adding a lot of new titles, yada yada yada. Long story short, it's interesting where some of these books fall. So like Batman is on issue 106 because it hasn't rebooted since the beginning of Rebirth. But at the same time, the next book we're going to talk about, Wonder Woman, is now up to issue 770, even though that's rebooted multiple times over the past several years. Superman is currently on issue 29, which I don't understand. Like, how can they put Wonder Woman back up to 770 and not put Batman and Superman back into the 900s? I mean, Batman's got to be on like 950, 960. Like, we're coming up on the true Batman 1000. We've got to be close with Superman too. I just don't understand why we're keeping this numbering and we're not using this, this opportunity to move back to the original numbering like we do with Wonder Woman coming up. Speaking of Wonder Woman, the second book I read this week was Wonder Woman 770, and this was a book I was really intrigued by because I liked the idea of Wonder Woman mixing with Norse mythology, Asgard, and Valhalla. Full disclosure, I don't have a ton of experience with Wonder Woman. The only series that I really got into was the Brian Azzarello, Cliff Chiang New 52 run. What made that story interesting to me was their depiction of the Greek gods and how they interacted with Diana and how they were depicted on the page, and then going from the Greek gods to the new gods in the second half of the series, I thought was just like a really, really cool direction to go in. And so knowing that this goes to Valhalla, I thought I might get some similar feels. It kind of gave me a God of War vibe where, obviously the original games, it's all about Greek gods, and now he's more in Norse mythology. So those things considered, I got really excited about reading this book. And I have to say, this book definitely did not disappoint. So basically what happens is, after the events of Infinite Frontier 0, Wonder Woman wakes up in Valhalla and she doesn't remember anything. She just knows, she wakes up on the battlefield and she learns over the course of the book that in Valhalla, everyone basically has a huge feast. They go out, do battle, they all kill each other, and then they wake up, have another feast, go into battle, and just over and over again in this perpetual cycle. She lives this cycle a few times throughout this first issue, and as she goes on, she slowly starts to piece together elements of her past, who she used to be, and she's also introduced to Yggdrasil. Siegfried appears in this as a supporting character and a quasi-love interest for her, and it left me off on a really good cliffhanger that left me really excited to read 771. Overall, I found that this book told a lot of story over the course of 20 pages and really felt like a juxtaposition to Superman, where not a whole lot happened. It really set the tone, but there wasn't a lot of story. This has a lot more meat on the bones. And I also found that the artwork in this was really, really good as well. There's a lot of attention to detail in this. You really, really feel the fantasy world that she's living in, which is really, really cool. I also found that I really liked how Travis Moore illustrates faces in this. Just very, very expressive, and really just added a lot of character to the character building in the actual script. So you might be asking, what's the catch? Well, again, we've got another $4.99 book because it's going to have a backup story in it. And this is where I have to go on a little bit of a rant. Like I said, I like the idea of backup stories. It's a good place, theoretically, to bring on new talent, throw out some new ideas, and find the next Jeff Johns, or, find the next Blue Beetle reinvention that everyone's going to fall in love with. Whatever it is. It's a good training ground and a good experimentation place. That said, Wonder Woman 770 has a backup story that I found incredibly irritating. It's like a baby's storybook. and I just don't understand why this is in here. Basically, the plot of this is baby Wonder Woman, it's her birthday, and she rides on a kangaroo around town and makes a big mess, and then at the end of the day, she has a birthday party with her family, and they're gonna make her tell a story to the rest of the group or something like that. And that's the entire story. And what I don't understand is how the demographic of people that's reading this book is going to be the same demographic of people that's reading this book. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and it feels like you're just forcing the issue. Like, is the idea, no pun intended, is the idea that, you know, your parents are gonna read the main story, and then you give the book to your kids and they're only gonna read the back part of the story? Like, I don't know anyone that reads comic books like that. So what is the end game in this, if not to just make sure that you charge $4.99? And the thing that really kills me about this is you have an 8-page backup story followed by a 6-page preview story for Nubia, which is a graphic novel coming out, Nubia Real One. And it didn't cost me an extra $1 to get a 6-page preview, so why am I paying an extra $1 to get an 8-page backup story that I didn't ask for? Moving right along. And here's a situation where I was actually more excited about the backup story than the main story, and I actually read it first because it's Punchline. And I really thought that the Punchline one-shot that came out last year already was very, very interesting and had a lot of cool concepts, and I was excited to see where they took it. And basically, this Punchline backup story is the ongoing series we might have had, but is now relegated to a Joker backup, which I think is weird because Punchline is popular right now, and I don't understand why they don't think that she can handle her own title. The only downside I would say to the Punchline story is it mostly reestablishes what happened in that one shot because that came out a while ago, but it definitely still left me hooked and still left me intrigued. The setup of this story to me is really, really interesting because you have Harper Row, who's trying to make sure Punchline stays behind bars, and her brother, Cullen, who is basically one of these Punchline fanboys. I think that this is going to be a great place to expand on Harper Row as a character and really get to know her more, and also just an intriguing story about social media and the internet age that we live in. Having said that, how was the main story of the Joker? So I actually was not particularly interested in this. I'm a little bit jokered out after Joker War, and I wasn't sure that this was really going to deliver me anything that I really wanted to see. And as I started reading this, I found the story to at first be somewhat superfluous and not what was advertised on the cover, because basically it's not the Joker book, it's the Jim Gordon book. And he's basically like tortured about all of Joker's past killings, and you know, there's a lot of great hard-boiled dialogue throughout. He's coming to terms with the facts of what Joker's done to Gotham City. It felt very year one, which was cool, but also somewhat been there, done that. Why do I need this book? That said, as the actual premise of what the book was going to be continues to unfold in the second chapter, I got really excited to see where this book was going. There are lots of really, really cool little flourishes that Tynion puts into this that sets it apart from other more run-of-the-mill Batman stories. For example, you learn when Joker released his laughing gas in Arkham, it was a unique strain that caused you to contort and smile but not laugh. So there was no early warning for people inside the building. They all got infected because they didn't know that the gas was out there because everyone was silent, which was really, really morbid, but an interesting detail. You also learn about a guard who sacrificed himself to save a whole bunch of people in Arkham who had been denied acceptance onto the police force by Gordon himself because he wasn't sure about him, only to learn that, you know, in Arkham he was a real hero and that Gordon maybe wasn't the best judge of character as he was hiring people on the police force, which was a really, really interesting touch that really humanized Gordon. This book also draws attention to the fact that Bane is dead, and there's actually a mural to him built in Gotham City, which you can see here in Little Santa Prisca, which was a really cool touch and a neat mural and neat image to include. Speaking of the art, we do get Gilliam March on art in this, and I liked it. I thought it was really good. I think he's a good fit for Joker. His kind of angular style fits the character very well. That said, I'm a little tired of Gilmarch on Batman. It seems like, since even before New 52, he was on Gotham City Sirens, and it's like always doing some kind of a Bat book all the time. I would love to see them utilize Gilmarch in a different way. If any of you guys have, some really great Gilmarch stories that are not Batman related, I would love to hear about those. I'd like to check it out. I would just like to see his voice applied somewhere else, because I've only ever really seen him doing Batman things. That little quibble aside though, this was a really, really good book, and I was very glad that I picked it up. Last and definitely the longest was Batman Urban Legends. This is DC's new Batman anthology book. In it you get 4 stories. Red Hood and Batman in Cheer, part 1 of 6. Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy and New Roots, which is a one-shot leading into the new Harley Quinn ongoing series. The Outsiders and Caretaker, part 1 of 3. And Grifter in the Long Con, part 1 of 5. All of that for a whopping $7.99, but it does come in a cool book-bound anthology, giant-size kind of a format. The question is, are all of these stories together really going to be worth the $7.99 price of admission? The reality is, the answer is probably not, but I am going to go through each of these individually and kind of give you my thoughts on them. I'll do it pretty quickly since there's a lot of ground to cover in this. First up is the Red Hood story, which is basically about Red Hood operating in Gotham, and does he kill, does he not kill, because this is Batman's town where you're not supposed to kill. He gets involved in the investigation of this cheer drug, which is scarecrow toxin, but has the opposite effect somehow, which I don't understand how like a slight tweak to the fear toxin makes it happy toxin, but whatever. Batman's working a parallel case. They meet somewhere in the middle. The whole story realistically felt very been there, done that. To the book's credit, there's a flashback in this where you see him as Robin in the Batcave, and it really does channel those late 80s post-crisis Jason Todd stories. But then when you're still channeling it, and now he's, a 40-year-old man, or whatever he is, it just feels played out. And so this title within the anthology was quite disappointing. Similarly disappointing for me, unfortunately, was the Harley Quinn story. And this is another one where it's like, I like my Harley Quinn funny, wall-breaking, over-the-top, like that's the fun of the character to me. And in this, somehow you end up with sad, dour Harley Quinn, and I just don't understand it. Basically, she's just like lamenting her past, and Poison Ivy's not around, and honestly, the particulars of it, I just read this and I don't even really remember it, because it's really just a tone setter for what the ongoing series is. And unfortunately, if this is what the ongoing series is going to be, I'm not looking forward to it, which is unfortunate. Third up in this is The Outsiders. And full disclosure, I'm not an Outsiders fan. I've never read a single Outsiders book in my life. I don't even know who's normally on the Outsiders team, like literally. Other than the fact that they work for Batman, that's all I know. So going into this, I was immediately wondering, how are you going to do a teen book in 8 or 10 pages? And the answer to that question is, you're not. You're going to do a story with 2 characters. In this case, it's Black Lightning and Katana, and you're gonna sort of reference, in the background you're gonna have Metamorpho, but he's not really super present. And basically the story of this is Black Lightning is captured. You get a flashback to how he was captured. You get a reference to Katana, and she's not there. You don't really know what happened to her. You just know that something's going on with her. And then presumably Black Lightning is gonna do a thing in this tower to escape. I still, after reading this, I don't really know who the characters are gonna be, what are the team dynamics of this, who the villain is, what the plot is. This was just baffling. And the thing about it is, this is part 1 of 3, so like in now 2 more issues, I'm going to have a whole arc of what happened. And at the end of the day, this was, counting it out, was 10 pages. So you're basically getting a 30-page story that's supposedly a team book with many characters, plus a villain, plus a plot, plus all those things, all squeezed into no amount of pages. And I just don't understand what the logic of putting something like that in an anthology book would be. I hope for the writer's sanity that this is really just a 3-part lead-in to an ongoing series that they'll actually get, so that the writer can actually grow these ideas, grow these characters, and actually do something that resembles a team story. If there's something I'm missing here, let me know down in the comments below. So finally, we're on to the last story, which of all things is a grifter story, which made me laugh because the only thing I really know about Grifter is that he's part of the Wildstorm universe, which means by definition, he's not a member of the Batman family. That said, this was actually my favorite read by far in this anthology book, which genuinely really surprised me. My only experience with Grifter before this is in the New 52. I read the first couple of issues, and my impression of him was that he was a Deathstroke wannabe, that this character already existed in the DC universe, and why am I reading a book? What makes this character interesting or special? This story immediately answers that question by drawing attention to it. There's actually dialogue at the very beginning of this book that basically says, you Grifter are not Deadshot, you're not Deathstroke, because you're not as good as those people. You're still pretty damn good, but you're not A-list. And so it sets up kind of a juxtaposition between Grifter being cocky and Grifter being put in his place. There's a moment where he kind of sneaks up on Batman and kind of gets a one-up on him, and then he tries to kick him in the nuts, and nothing happens because Batman's armored. and he's like, what? Really? No reaction whatsoever? And the rug is constantly being pulled out from under him like that throughout the book, and it just made for a lot of fun, entertaining storytelling. Now, all of that said, similar to The Outsiders, I just don't have a lot of experience with Grifter. So this could be a situation where if you're a huge Grifter fan, and it's like, oh my god, this is just pissing all over the Grifter character. I have no idea if that's the case. I apologize if you're hearing this and you love Grifter and it sounds awful. But for me, as someone who doesn't know anything about Grifter, doesn't understand his place in the DC universe, this found a really neat spot to put him in, and I'm excited to see where it goes. It was just genuinely a lot of fun, and I found myself pleasantly surprised for what ended up being the last story in this massive $7.99 anthology book. So all of that said, similar to last week, I am going to give you my ranking of this week's DC Infinite Frontier books. And I will go from least favorite to most favorite. Not surprisingly, first up is going to be Batman Urban Legends. I mean, $7.99 for a book where 1 out of the 4 stories was entertaining. Not a good start to this whole anthology idea. I like the idea of anthologies, I genuinely do. The same thing with backup stories, like it's a great place to grow new ideas, grow new talent. But when your lead story is just kind of a dark and dour Red Hood story, and you also have a middle story that's a team book, but you're doing it, 10 pages at a time, like, you just gotta be smarter about what you put in these anthologies if you're gonna get people to buy into them. If you're interested in the Grifter story, I think great, but there's no reason you can't just wait for these 5 issues to be bound together in their own $10 book and just get that and skip all the rest of the stuff that's in here. Next up, I'm gonna have to go with Superman 29. Which I'm disappointed that this is second from the bottom. Don't take that as a bad thing, because I like this book a lot, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. It's too bad that this is going to be continued in Action Comics so that you have to buy it bi-weekly. For me, that's going to work fine because I'm reviewing all of the books, but I think it's going to be a case of too much money per month for the average reader, which is unfortunate. This Infinite Frontier universe, and possibly take on the mantle from Clark Kent for a while, we'll see. Can't wait to find out what happens next in Action Comics. Penultimate issue. Knocked down mainly because of the backup story being the worst of the week, and that is Wonder Woman 770. I really dig the Valhalla background of this. I really, really like Wonder Woman immersing herself in this universe and getting to know Siegfried, and all illustrated, the best out of any book that came out this week. The only thing holding this back really from being number one is that backup story that's made for children. Which means the book of the week, which was actually the one I was probably the least interested in reading, has got to go to the Joker. So I really didn't want it to be, because like I've done a lot of Batman videos since I've been back, and I don't want this to just be the Batman channel. But man, Tinian writes the heck out of this, and I was so impressed. Plus, it had the best backup story by far with Punchline. Cannot recommend this book enough. You should definitely check it out. It is worth the hype. With all of that said, I hope you enjoyed this week's DC books. I will be back in a week with the next round of Infinite Frontier titles. Also be sure to tune back this weekend where I'll hopefully have a video out talking about some of the other stuff that I've been reading. Have a good one, guys.